Wow. I'm sorry, that kind of got me.
It's been nothing but paint and peeling wallpaper for days, but we're getting there. We're getting there. The view is worth it. The view is spectacular. So
That's great. That's pretty funny. Sorry for choking on that there. So we have Tony Heacott coming in. We have Meredith Matthews. So Leslie, at this point, we're still waiting for Rex, and we have Robin Prasker from City of Eureka.
Well, let's, it is precisely 5:30. We have quorum. I am imagining Rex will join. I'll just send him a text, just let him.
Remind him. Peter, I'm going to go ahead and have you mute your screen for the moment and go from there.
Okay. Well, let's call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And we'll go ahead and start off with a roll call. I'm not going to call in any particular order, just the order I see on my screen. Robin Smith.
Who's desperately trying to unmute. Present.
Frank Wilson.
Here.
Meredith Matthews.
Here.
And Elaine Hogan.
Hi, I'm here. I just want to apologize for any background noise. I had some car trouble on the way home, so I'm not at my house. But I'm here. Thanks.
No problem. And I don't believe Rex has joined us. Oh, Rex texted me that he is out of town. So I guess he will not be joining us today. Okay. And with that, we'll move on to item number 2, the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the HWMA board and will be enacted upon by one motion unless a specific request for review is made by a board member or a member of the public. The consent calendar will not be read. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless pulled for discussion. Does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Are there any members of the public who would like to make comment on the consent calendar on any item? Okay. Is there any discussion or anything in the consent calendar in whole, or shall we just move to a vote? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Frank and Robin, with the second. All right. Any further considerations? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone abstaining? Any no votes? Okay, unanimous yes vote with board member Bone absent. Motion passes. And we'll move on to oral and written communications. This is the time for people to address the board or to submit written communication concerning matters not on this agenda. Board members may respond to statements, but any request that requires board action will be referred to staff for review. Reasonable time limits may be imposed on both the total amount of time allocated for this item and on the time permitted to each individual speaker. Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment? Okay, we will close the, have we received any written communication?
We did, and you will note that in the board packet itself, there is a letter from Mike Knight. It's actually a very sweet note. Mike Knight was the retired assistant city manager for Eureka. I had not heard from him in a long time, and so I didn't realize that he had actually relocated over towards the Chico area. And so he sent a really kind note talking about the services that we've been providing here at HWMA. If you would like, Leslie, I can read it into the record for those folks who haven't had a chance to read it. It just simply says, Jill, this is Mike Knight, retired Assistant City Manager for Eureka. I wanted to take a minute to praise your operations and to tell you that I did not realize how spoiled I was for having such an easy time in Eureka to dispose of recycle, green waste, household hazardous waste, and metal. Again, I did not realize how spoiled I was until we moved to Chico and tried to utilize the same service in Butte County, but their operations are horrible. HHW disposal in Butte County is limited to Friday and Saturday morning, resulting in huge wait times, long lines in the car and in the heat. To dispose of metal, recycle, or green waste, you have to be in the same long lines as the Neal Road facility, which is their landfill. I have observed huge truckloads of green waste dumped in the same piles as solid waste. Again, your operation has spoiled me by being able to drive up on the left side of the facility and to drop off recycle, metal, and HHW in minutes. Thanks for an extremely efficient operations that you provide for Humboldt County. And, I thought it was really sweet. It was, like I said, it was great to hear from him. I do want to note that it wasn't that long ago that we were only doing Saturday, collections for the public. And so we would do that the first Saturday of every month. And a few years back, we looked at it and, with the approval of the board, we moved to HHW disposal 6 days a week. And what we have seen is a far more efficient operation, and we are seeing more material volumes coming in, which of course is beginning to create a little bit of a compaction in terms of the demands for our staff time, but it's also showing that by making it easier to do the right thing, people are availing to the services and making sure that the materials are being properly handled. So I really appreciate that Mike reached out and gave us an update. And that's the only other comments that I have received.
Thank you, Jill, for sharing that. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close the oral and written communications and move on to something I'm really excited about, which is the presentation and waste characterization report prepared by a Cascadia Consulting Group. And I believe we have...
Yeah, we have Dieter here. So what I do want to do just real quick is to introduce in particular for Robin and Meredith. They are our new board members. And so when we undertook this, it was in October of 2019 so that the authority could conduct a solid waste characterization audit for materials that are generated by HWMA's member agencies. There were 2 sampling periods that were initially proposed. Unfortunately, the second one, which was the summer month of 2020, I ended up having to be postponed thanks to this little thing called a pandemic that occurred. So the summer sampling event was postponed until this past June of 2021. And Emily Terrell did an awful lot of work, and she gave you all the preliminary findings earlier this year. And Dieter has let us know that she and her husband have just had a baby in the last week and a half, I think. And so Dieter is going to be presenting to us. He's with Cascadia Consulting Group. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dieter.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm excited to be here. I am going to try and share my screen. So hopefully this works. Usually it does, but never when you actually want it to. So here we go. Let's see what happens. First, it's going to come up in not quite in presentation mode. I'm not quite there yet, but that's okay. We'll get there. All right. Hopefully you guys are seeing a PowerPoint presentation. If all that worked correctly. Thumbs up, PowerPoint up on the screen.
Thumbs up.
Excellent. All right, super. I wanted to, as I noted, say thank you for having me here. I appreciate the time, and thanks to Jill for being an awesome partner, and everyone at the authority for being an awesome partner on this project, as she noted. There have been some hurdles along the way, a pandemic, for example, it's just been great working through all of that with you and the team. Again, Emily Terrell was the project manager for this project. She couldn't be here; she had a baby recently, and so I get to do this. I was involved in the project as well, so I've got a little bit of background here. I've been in Cascadia for 17 years. I'm the director of our research line of business. I've been doing designing, leading, analyzing, reporting on waste characterization studies basically since day one at Cascadia. My first project was working night shifts in New York City collecting garbage samples. So, and yet after 17 years, every year at Christmas, I still have to explain to my parents what it is I do for work. So someday they'll get it, maybe, I hope. Just a quick overview again, as Jill noted, I can't see my slides. We began the study in late 2019 with a lot of planning. We did the first round of fieldwork in February 2020, kind of just in the nick of time before COVID shut us all down. We were going to do a second round in June 2020 that got postponed to June 2021. The methodology for this study was intended to be very similar to the methodology used on the 2010 study that Cascadia also did for the authority that I also worked on as well. So there's a lot of comparability there between the two studies. And then again, with the COVID shutdown and starting back up, we had a kind of a cool opportunity to look at what the waste looked like before COVID, BC, and then sort of during COVID, kind of pre-Delta, but I don't know, what were we in between the third and fourth waves there, or something like that. So just a few changes since 2010. Material list that we were sorting into changed. So, we'll get into this, but, garbage sample comes in, we dump it out. We actually hand sort everything that's on the ground there in our sample into one of 73 material categories. Like, this is a paper cup, it goes in the paper cup category. This is cardboard, it goes in the cardboard category, which tweaked those categories a little bit. Primarily, some things we pulled out from the 2010 study. We had a big focus on sort of trying to characterize the materials being disposed by illegal grow operations back then. Less of a focus on that this time around, more focus on the food to be reflective of all of the, SB 1383 and other legislation around organics disposal in the state. So those are kind of the big tweaks. Some other ones just to acknowledge the changing hauling and processing landscape since 2010, right? Recology has increased their presence in the county. The old Arcata MRF went away. So just, some of those things. And tonight, there's a written report. It's a couple 100 pages long, full of detail. That's where a lot of the detail is. Tonight's just going to be sort of hitting the high points of that. We'll be talking about the results from both seasons of fieldwork combined together. The report has some of that detail actually broken out by season. We're only going to be talking about the garbage. We did characterize some C&D loads as part of the study, but they're a relatively small portion of the waste, and so I'm just not going to review that stuff tonight. All of that stuff's in the report. If you need bedtime, putting yourself to sleep material, go read the report. Tonight is going to be exciting. This is not going to sleep material tonight. Just an overview of what we were looking at and where it came from. We did characterize waste from sort of the 5-member cities as well as the unincorporated county in the authority service area. We looked at the residential garbage, the commercial garbage, and the self-haul garbage from each of those geographic breakdowns. Blue Lake and parts of the unincorporated county have combined residential commercial service, so we don't have residential versus commercial breakdown for those places. We just have what we're calling combined waste for those places. So again, Blue Lake and like Willow Creek have that combined service. And so this is just sort of a little matrix to show what we looked at there. Process overview. Pictures and words make it sound really easy. It's actually a lot of legwork. And so just a real big shout out, thank you to all the haulers, HumSan and Recology, that really made this happen. Without them, this doesn't work. They were hauling special loads around for us. They were hauling loads from Redway all the way up to the Hawthorne Street transfer station for us. Sort of special loads. HumSan again doing the same thing, bringing things down from the north end of the county just for us. The Hawthorne Street transfer station staff were awesome and accommodating all the things we had going on, special trucks coming in, needing space, that kind of stuff. The authority staff again was also great. So just without them, this doesn't happen. So before I even talk about anything, I want to say how great it's been working with the whole team there, and how, as Jill noted with the letter from the old city manager, you guys have it good there. You have really great hauling partners. It doesn't work this well in lots of places. We do this all over, and it does not run as smoothly in a lot of places as it did there in Humboldt County. So thank you for all the help from everyone. To make the study happen, we start off with a lot of planning. We met with the haulers, we met with the authority staff, we kind of talked through the process. We got a list of all the routes that they serve, whether they're residential or commercial routes. We pre-selected the routes we wanted to sample from using a random process so that random routes were selected. We coordinated to have those routes all brought down to the Hawthorne Street transfer station. Once a load comes into the transfer station, it dumps its garbage out on the ground like it normally would. And then we worked with the transfer station staff to go and grab a scoop of garbage, a 200-pound scoop of garbage out of that load. And they brought it over and they dumped it on a tarp. You can see in the second picture here, that's one of our garbage samples sitting on a tarp, waiting to be sorted. So truck comes in, dumps out, we get a scoop, put it on a tarp. This, the number of samples we had sort of builds up throughout the day as the sort crew works. The third picture here is the sort crew actually sorting the samples. They get in there, like I said, by hand. They pick everything up in that sample, figure out what it is, and put it in the appropriate basket. We had 73 material types that we were sorting into. Once they're done sorting out one sample, they grab out the iPad, then they start logging data in. We use a custom tool we built for managing all of our waste characterization data, cloud-based, so they can just do it all on the iPad while they're there in the field, and it works super cool, and it's pretty neat. But like I said, sounds simple when we're looking at the pictures, but man, there's a lot of herding cats sometimes. So again, thanks for all the help. Now comes the good stuff, the data. Just a quick overview based on what the haulers and the authority have in their records. There's about 90,000 tons of waste that were disposed in 2019. And we used 2019 tonnage in the analysis just to reflect normal, right? What a normal year looks like. We thought about using 2020, but half of 2020 was three-quarters of 2020 was super weird. And so far, 2021 has been super weird. So maybe those weren't the right years to use for tonnages. So we were able to use the composition data that we collected and project it onto 2019 tons. Like I said, about 90,000 tons. It's about a third self-haul waste, about a third residential waste, and about a third commercial waste. There's that sliver of combined residential commercial waste. It's a pretty small piece of the overall. The second pie chart here, the colorful yellow one, just kind of is a summary of where that waste is coming from. No big surprises here either, right? Like unincorporated county is almost 50% of that waste. Eureka accounts for most of the rest. And then there's little bits from Rio Dell, Ferndale, Blue Lake, and Arcata. Arcata is more than a little bit, but relative to the unincorporated county, they're a little bit. And then this is the first really high-level overview of the findings. So about half of the material disposed is readily recoverable. It's 47%. And by readily recoverable, we mean it's recyclable or compostable with sort of standard curbside recycling or compost collection programs. They're materials that have regular markets. They're materials that the processing capacity and infrastructure are well defined and exist. There's no magic to getting those materials recycled or composted, other than actually getting residents and businesses to put them in a bin for collection. About 15% of the overall food is 15% of the overall garbage is non-donatable food. And that's the most common material type we found in the waste. Nothing else was more than 15% of the waste. Non-donatable food, kind of a weird name. There's the flip side of that, which is donatable food. And so that was the distinction we made in the food to align with SB 1383 requirements. Non-donatable food is basically any food that's not in its original packaging that was probably sold in a package, or it's in an open package, or it's food that's been prepared and then was partially consumed or just thrown away unconsumed but prepared. So, like an open package of salami or a catering tray full of refried beans, or that kind of stuff goes here in the non-donatable food. We'll talk more about the potentially donatable food in another slide here. The residential and commercial sectors, over a third of the waste is compostable. Pretty usual, that's not unusual. You'll go all over the country and find that number to rarely dip lower and frequently go higher than that. So it's a little bit lower in the self-haul sector, I believe, but that's just because the self-haul sector includes a lot more of just that sort of mom and pop or small contractor and landscaper clean out types of materials. So a lot more construction debris and that kind of waste. About 1,900 tons of the total garbage in the authority service area is potentially donatable food. So this is, again, that flip side of non-donatable food. And this is food that is in its original unopened package, if it was sold in a package, or it's food like lettuce and carrots that wouldn't normally be sold packaged, but they're unprocessed and unconsumed. So a whole head of lettuce, whole carrots, those kinds of things would go here. So this is really that, and we'll talk more about SB 1383 a little later, but this is really that piece of that sort of secondary goal in SB 1383 of donating edible food to human consumption. This is your universe of edible food, about 1,900 tons. Oh, whoops, I think I scrolled through too many slides there. So one of the things, way too many slides, whoops. One of the takeaways from this is just, there's a lot of compostable and organic material in the trash. That's the big takeaway. And that's the big opportunity. So a little more detail here, as I noted, when we're out sorting the materials, we sorted into 73 material types. We group those material types into groups we call material classes. So the papers, the plastics, the metals, the glass. This figure on the left, the bar chart on the left, just summarizes the quantity of how much paper there is or how much plastic there is overall. As you can see, the other organic, so that's mostly food and yard waste, is the biggest piece of the waste. There's a lot of paper, 19% of the trash is paper. There's a lot of inerts and other, which again is concrete, lumber, shingles, that's coming out of not necessarily construction loads, although some of it's in construction loads, but it's just the general stuff that people bring in when they're, mom and pop doing a house cleanup, right? So that really drives that number up. Not a lot of hazardous waste in the trash, as there shouldn't be, so that's good to know, but there still is some. Almost 0.5% of the waste is hazardous waste. A little bit of electronics, a little bit of glass, but mostly paper, mostly organics, and mostly inerts. The other thing we can do with that data is, once we've sorted those 73 material types, we could then group them by recoverability. So that's the bar chart on the right-hand side here. Recoverable paper, it's about 11% of the waste. So not all paper is recoverable, right? Like some kinds of paper, waxed cardboard, for example. Well, that's compostable. That's a bad example, but a spiral-bound notebook or a frozen juice can, which has a foil liner and metal ends, that kind of thing. That's non-recoverable paper. So even though it's paper, it's not recoverable. So the recoverable paper, it's about 11%. The other recoverable materials, this is the rest of your recyclable materials, like plastic bottles, glass bottles. That's also about 11% of the waste. The compostable materials, they're about 25% of the waste. That's mostly food. It's some yard waste. Potentially recoverable. These are things that either don't have solid infrastructure for collection or don't have good markets. So this is a lot of things like e-waste and some other stuff where you're like, yes, it's recyclable, but it's not super easy for a resident or business to do. They have to take it somewhere. Or it's things like styrofoam, which is totally recyclable, but there's just not a good market for it. So it's those kinds of things that could be recovered, but are missing just one piece of the puzzle. That's about 20% of the waste. Problem materials are the things that have neither good markets nor good infrastructure. Painted drywall, I'm trying to think what else was in this category. I didn't like a lot of the schmudge that's at the bottom of a garbage truck. It's a mix of all kinds of things, right? Like there's nothing in there to recover. Trash bags, plastic trash bags, that kind of stuff. So that's about a third of the waste there in the problem materials. We'll get into this detail a little bit more when we talk about what does the residential versus the commercial look like, but really it doesn't change a whole lot. Residential, commercial, they both look more or less like this. We'll get into that in another slide in a little bit here. So what are the most recoverable things? This is just a list of the 5 most recoverable materials in the waste. As I noted earlier, food, the not donatable food, is about 15%. Here we go. We see it. It's the most prevalent recoverable material in the waste. It's the most prevalent material, period, in the waste. Other recyclable paper is pretty prevalent, almost 7%. And this is the things like, it's recyclable paper that's not cardboard, basically. So it's newspaper, receipts, all the rest, the cereal boxes, all the rest of that recyclable paper. All told, these 5 materials are about 33.5% of the waste overall, the garbage overall, and they're about 70% of the recoverable materials. So easy peasy. You get people to put these 5 things in their recycling or compost bin, and voila, you could, reduce your trash by 33.5%. If it were easy peasy, it's not. But next slide we have here. This is again that material class, but for each of the sectors, residential, commercial, combined, and self-haul. As I noted, you can see the percents change a little bit, but more or less the pattern is the same. Mostly organics, a little bit of paper, and a little bit of plastics. The one kind of outlier is that self-haul. That's again the people who are hauling in their own waste instead of having it picked up by a waste hauler. You can see there's a lot more inerts in that waste. Again, as we noted, it's a lot of construction debris, a lot less organics, a lot more metal. People bringing in, whatever it is they've got, an old chain link fence or something that's in their metal is there. So, the pattern changes a bit, but not a whole lot. Doesn't matter really who's bringing in the waste. It all kind of looks the same. The recoverability, again, by sector. Again, the pattern for each of the sectors looks more or less like it did for the overall. Lots of organics in the residential and commercial. A little less organic, compostables. Lots of compostables in the residential and commercial. A little less in the self-haul, but still a fair amount. The problem materials, again, those things that have either no markets or no infrastructure. It's about a third of the waste across all of the, all the sectors. It doesn't change a lot. So, everybody needs sort of their own special kick in the pants to recycle and compost, but it doesn't have to change too much because, again, people are doing about the same thing, whether they're a resident or a business. So that's kind of the takeaway here. Again, top 5 materials, they look similar across all the streams. The not donatable food is the top material in 3 of the sectors here, the residential, the commercial, and that combined residential commercial. It's the second most common material in the self-haul. So even in the self-haul, it's still pretty common. And that's actually a little unusual. The self-haul sector, depending on where you are in the state, doesn't always contain this much food. But I just think it reflects the nature of the kinds of customers that use your transfer stations. It's people who don't have collection at home. Whereas you go to some place like where I'm at in Seattle, the self-haul waste is not people who don't have collection at home because you're required to have collection here. The self-haul is the people who are bringing in, their house clean out. So there's a lot less food in that way. So having a lot of food in the self-haul is kind of, it's a little unusual, but not unheard of. Regardless, again, looking across the sectors here, 5 material types account for about 40% of the waste in general. And more importantly, they account for about 70% of the recoverable material in general, regardless of which sector you're looking at. So again, focusing on 5 materials oftentimes is kind of a, the key to driving up. It's just a key opportunity. Lots of compostables again here. That's the other takeaway. Lots of compostables. So a little more dive into SB 1383. I talked early on, these bar charts should probably be in the other order. I talked early on about 1,900 tons of edible food. It should also be called potentially donatable food. Ignore that title. Potentially donatable food. There's about 1,900 tons. It's coming about 500 tons from the residential sector, about 560 tons from the commercial sector. The potentially donatable food is only about 10% of all the food, though. So most of the food that people are throwing away are items that couldn't be recovered under that SB 1383 goal of recovering food for human consumption, right? So about 10% of the food can be captured towards that goal, and about 90% of it cannot. So just a kind of a thing to keep in mind as you think through how to hit that goal for the SB 1383. The bar chart on the left is using sort of this SB 1383 specific definition of organic. It's a little different than what we presented earlier on in those material class figures where we showed the organic. Oh, sorry, a deer just ran through my backyard. The SB 1383 organics includes not just food and yard waste, but it also includes paper, carpet, textiles, lumber. So it's a much broader definition of organic than what we typically think of as organic. So looking at that SB 1383 definition of organics, the organics are about half of the total waste in the authority. 54% of the waste in the residential, 53% in the commercial, 44% in the self-haul. It's really hard to see in the tiny little combined waste bar there, but it's about 50% of the combined waste. So, again, under SB 1383, if you have to divert 75% of the organics by 2025, and the organics are 50% of your waste, you need to be diverting 75% to 50%. So about 40% of the total garbage being disposed right now needs to be diverted by 2025 to meet that SB 1383 regulation or requirement. So big numbers. There's lots of opportunity and lots of hair pulling coming up to try and get there. And I had one more slide that I kind of didn't get fully made that I wanted to talk about, just thinking through sort of the differences between the two seasons. I noted sort of the study gave us this cool chance to look at how did the garbage look before and during the pandemic. And in the end, I didn't put the slide in here because there wasn't a lot to say. It really didn't change a whole lot. There were some things bumped up, a few things bumped down. But when you're looking at percents and they all have to add to 100, like that's natural. If one thing goes up, another thing has to go down because otherwise they won't add to 100 anymore. So, but we did some statistical testing on those changes between seasons to try and sort of suss out if the changes were real. Like, is this a real change we're seeing? Or are they sort of an artifact of just the sampling process, right? Since we're not hand sorting every piece of garbage that goes through the transfer station, we're only sorting a portion of it. There's some error associated with our numbers, and we can quantify that error. And so the differences we saw between seasons are those differences within that margin of error, or are they outside that margin of error? And basically, when we looked at the differences between seasons, there was nothing that jumped out as being sort of outside that margin of error. All those differences, fell within sort of the expected variability, or the variability we would have expected just based on the sampling routine. Likewise, when we looked at this study's data versus the 2010 data, there were a few changes that were sort of outside that that margin of error. The organics actually went down considerably from 2010 to 2021. It went from 40% down to 30%, and that's a big enough change that the statistics say that's real. Something happened over the last 10 years that really drove down the portion of organic waste in the trash. And I think the proportion of C&D waste went up over that same period, and the statistics say that's a real change. So those were kind of the interesting things that jumped out across those two comparisons between the old study and the new study, as well as the pre-pandemic, during pandemic characterizations. And that's all I got. I'm happy to sit here and answer questions for as long as you would like. I have oodles of data I could probably sift through real quick if there's a specific question. Like I said, a lot of this is in the report. And if we want to talk about how the process works or anything, again, I've got a lot of insight into that, and I'm happy to answer questions for as long as you'd like to have me here.
Thank you, Peter. I do want to let board members know that a copy of the complete report was provided to you electronically. And I received notice this afternoon that the hard copy reports are ready for pickup tomorrow. So I'll get those distributed to each of you. We'll also be getting some copies of the final report to your respective member agencies. So your staff will have an opportunity. One of the things that I think, and I'm really glad Robin is here from the city of Eureka tonight. One of the things that I think is going to be really intriguing, if you will, for the member agencies is to take a look at some of the differences between the 2010 and the 2014, excuse me, and the 2020 information. There was also a statewide study that was done in 2014 that we participated in. So it was a little bit more of an aggregate number, but we do have a little bit more data than some places do. I actually found the decrease in some of the organics really interesting from between the 2010 and 2020. And it, really kind of speaks to increasingly we're seeing more people utilizing green waste services for curbside pickup. We're seeing more people participate in self-haul, and we certainly have seen that at the transfer station in terms of green waste material being brought into us. And of course, I think that AB 1826, in terms of those generators that hit those various tiers between the 4 and the 2, because we're dropping down to the 2-ton tiers. And, so I think that there are more awareness, and that is not in any way, shape, or form meant to not recognize the efforts that individuals have been taking backyard scene in the participation of like the worm guy. So there's a whole host of different activities that are occurring. And this is one of the numbers I was going to be most curious about. And it is really great to see that at a sort of a low tech kind of scale, we can be making higher diversion of our organics and green waste material. So yes, we will get those hard copies out to everybody as well.
Thanks, Dieter, for the report. Do any board members have questions?
I don't have a questions, but I just want to comment that was really interesting. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Go for it, Frank.
One is donatable food. I mean, this is garbage, right? So
Yeah,
how do you get garbage into being donatable food?
that's an excellent question. So one more piece of clarification there. I want to make it clear that the food was no longer donatable by the time we saw it. Like, there's nothing there we would have pulled out and fed to a person. But the idea, and you guys probably know this even better than I do, but 1383, one of the goals in 1383 is that the tonnage of donatable food being disposed, right? Or donatable types of food being disposed has to go down by 20%. You have to figure out how to divert 20% of that to human consumption by 2025. So the idea being that when that food went in the garbage, it was donatable. So you kind of have to short circuit that process and say, okay, I work at Starbucks. I've got a tray full of muffins. I'm not going to put these in the garbage. I'm going to instead figure out how to get them to another human for human consumption. So if I'm, I might be reading between the lines in your question, but you're right. Like, once it's in the garbage, you can't then divert it to people. You got to short circuit the process and get it before it goes into the garbage.
Well, that's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
It's a good answer. But from what you just said, so now I'm at Starbucks and I got whatever it was you said that I had that are
Muffins
or something. So what's the motivation? Is this something that we're to create a motivation for Starbucks to donate? I mean, all this sounds great. Let's they just come out, let's eliminate gas powered engines by 2028. we're not going to do that. Well, I don't know how they're going to fall a tree with a battery-powered chainsaw in the lumber industry. So there's a lot of things that sound great from a legislative point of view. But on the realistic side, which is in this case, 1383 is throwing this not to HWMA, but they're throwing it to the each jurisdiction, who in turn, the jurisdictions are going to have to create, it appears, another agency or another entity based out of the same garbage company that's, or waste management company that's in the local area. So it's kind of a catch-22, and we're getting stuck with a deal here.
I don't disagree with any of that. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with all kinds of sort of legislative requirements, right? Like, do this, good luck, right? Like, there's not a lot of prescriptive of instructions on how to accomplish that. So yeah, I don't have the answer on how to make the Starbucks worker donate that food and how to implement that program, but I am here to let you know that there are 1,900 tons of edible food or potentially donatable food in the authority's garbage that kind of is your universe there that you need to, or not you personally, but that needs to be managed to help meet the 1383 requirements. So yeah, it's a big lift, and yeah. Jill, I think maybe you're putting your hand up, so I'll stop talking.
It's a good report. I don't question that, but I like what you're telling us, but you're telling us, because everybody that I've asked, everywhere we've asked, the answer is consistently, yeah, I get it, but nobody has an answer as to how they're going to solve 1383. So I thank you for your report, and I just express my frustration with them.
No, I hear you. And Jill, I want to say one more thing real quick, but
Absolutely.
I hear you. And again, everyone we talk to is like, I don't know how to do this. And I think there's some big hurdles. I saw in a presentation at CRRA this year, well, I guess they didn't do it last year. I can't remember. Anyways, recently, that basically the processing capacity for handling that donatable food is about an order of magnitude short of where it needs to be. So if the system currently handles 200,000 tons or whatever it is, it needs to be able to handle 2 million tons to meet the goal. And the system doesn't even exist to do it. So even if you could get the Starbucks worker to donate that food, like, does the system exist to handle it? So I feel your frustration, and I don't have the answer to it.
Thank you.
So Frank, if I could kind of jump a little bit further, SB 1383 is a state goal, and what they've identified is that there's millions of tons of material, and they're not looking to little Humboldt County for that, but they are looking at places like in the Central Valley where you see a lot of farm produce that's available, and for whatever reason, whether it's ugly food or any other reason, it ends up being put into the landfill, and they're trying to find a way in which that material could be recovered and then get put into places like food banks or other sort of food recovery operations. So, Humboldt County at 1,900 tons is kind of a drop in the bucket, but we too have places like Food for People and a number of the nonprofit organizations which try to help ensure some food security issues for people. So maybe those, muffins for Starbucks, now that they're aware of this, they could be making on a weekly basis a donation to Food for People or some similar type of organization. So that's going to be happening from grocery stores. It's going to be happening from the back end of hospitals because they have very large dietary departments. So instead of, disposing any of that material, making sure that it's getting plugged into some sort of, efforts, whether it's, perhaps the mission, for helping to feed homeless individuals and things like this. And so part of what Dieter is identifying is that infrastructure is there in some communities, it's not there in others. And, in ours, we have a little bit of both. And I think that's been a real testament from the volunteer organizations that we have. But it's going to be about the cities now working more, and the county working more directly with those producers and ensuring that they are availing to all of these other systems before they just toss it out into the garbage bin. It's probably the easiest way I can put it.
Thank you. Do any other members of the board have questions for Peter? I have a couple questions, but I wanted, and just to echo Meredith, thank you. We really appreciate the report. I was curious, I'm the representative from Eureka. I noticed that Arcata and Eureka had kind of the same number of samples, 47, I believe, but Eureka's was substantially more in tonnage. Are people in Eureka just producing more garbage or I mean, clearly there's kind of different industries in Eureka, but could you speak a little bit more to that?
I don't have a good answer to that. I don't know why the Eureka tonnage is higher than Arcata. I don't know if there's a boundary definition there, like, the city of Eureka is some amount, but there's a lot of unincorporated county nearby that sort of makes the population looks bigger, but actually their tons get counted as unincorporated county. Again, the tonnage information was presented to us by the haulers and the authority, so I don't have the exact answer on why the tons. The commercial, of course, is a piece of it. There's a bigger commercial base in, I think. I mean, I've definitely been to Arcata and Eureka and was there, right before the pandemic, meeting with Jill and the team. But my sense is that the commercial base is bigger in Eureka than it is, and the HSU tons don't count in Arcata. They count separately. So even though there's a ton of students on campus and a ton of waste coming out of HSU, it's not driving that Arcata tonnage number because it's managed separately. So their tons are not accounted for in this. I think that's true. Is that true, Jill?
That is correct.
Yeah. So.
Interesting. And then another kind of question is, I mean, it's exciting that there is so much, potentially divertible material, but then there's also this, 30 to 40% of problem material. Those are things that really don't have a place. Like, what would you say would be the worst of them? And then also kind of related to this, do you see kind of communities creating kind of targeted campaigns about some of those materials and or kind of advocacy to the producers of those materials?
Well, I mean, the advocacy to the producers, yes, right? Like there's EPR legislation winding its way through the state legislature, through some city and local legislatures, things like plastic bag bans, styrofoam bans. I mean, I know bans aren't the solution to everything, but to answer your question about legislation, yes, we do see that legislation. We see it not just in California, but in all kinds of places all over the country. In terms of particular materials, I was gonna try and look up real quick what the most prevalent problem materials are. The one I know for sure, the one big one is going to be what kind of the catch-all category we have called mixed residue, which is again just all the schmudge, like the stuff that we can't figure out what it is, or it's really tiny. It's down at like the less than ½ inch or 1 inch sort of level. It's bottle caps and shredded paper and individual grains of rice and things like that, where it's just kind of all falls through the system and there's no managing it. So that's almost always the biggest, the most common sort of problem material. But other than that, there's the things like well, in this particular study, there's a lot of the kinds of plastics fall in there. Trash bags is often a big one. Like you don't think about the trash bags as the trash themselves, but they are the trash themselves, and so it's frequently a big chunk of the waste. So, what are you going to tell people not to buy trash bags? I don't know, but thinking of materials, like they actually end up being a considerable fraction of the trash. Oftentimes, it's things like diapers. Diapers, again, I don't have the number in front of me handy, but I don't even know if we sorted diapers separately. And then that one I can figure out relatively quick, but diapers are often a huge chunk of the waste, and I don't think we sorted them separately here, but I'm going to predict that if we had, the diapers would be probably 6 to 8% of the total waste. They would be in the top 5 materials overall, no matter what. They are almost always one of the top 5 materials. So that's a big chunk. And again, what are you going to do? Tell people not to use diapers? Like, sure, there are alternatives, but again, it takes a lot of sort of infrastructure and programs to sort of make that wholesale change from disposable diapers to reusable diapers. But in terms of opportunity, it's a good one. So I kind of rambled on for a long time again. I hope I answered your question. Yes, there's legislation. Yes, some of it's pushing back on producers, and others of it is sort of trying to control, push both sides, like the supply side and the demand side. And then those big opportunities, again, none of them are easy, but there's things like diapers, trash bags. And then some of it is, just developing the markets. Like there's things in there, like a lot of the kinds of plastics, the 337s plastics, which, the market for that comes and goes depending on the price of oil. And if there was somehow to build a greater demand for those plastics, there'd be there's a huge supply of them. So you just got to figure out how to create demand for them.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to make comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Anything else for members of the board? Okay. Thanks again, Peter, for coming, and good luck with your family at the holidays.
One of these days, they're going to get it.
Get it. And yeah, we really appreciate the report, and I think it will be really useful for our work on SB 1383. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. And again, thank you for having me.
For sure. All right. Well, we will move on to item number 5, receive report on the September 14th, 2021 HWMA transfer station fire and approve the letter to the editor.
I'm actually going to back up one. Can I get a motion in a second to accept the report and to distribute it to everybody?
Sorry about that. I just thought we were.
It's all good.
So I was just going to keep moving. Okay, yes. Can I have a motion and a second to receive the report and distribute it?
I'll make the motion to receive the presentation and waste characterization report and to send it out.
And I'll second.
Okay, Meredith, and a second from Elaine. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Motion passes with board member Bone absent. And now we'll move on to item number 5. Apologies about that. Where we'll receive the report on the transfer station fire and approve the letter to the editor.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. Normally, I would give a short little introduction, and the introduction is going to be the video itself. And then I'll go ahead and address it. So we're going to try doing this, and hopefully it works. Can you see my screen? Is that a yes? Yes, okay. I've got things. We were having big technological issues earlier today, so I'm not taking anything for granted. So sit back and hold on.
If there's sound, Jill, we have no sound.
Is there sound now? Is there sound now?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. I'm not sure what sound's not working. It's okay. It's a silent security camera. I'm sorry you gal didn't get a chance to hear the great soundtrack that went with it, but there we are. So this event, of course, occurred on September 14th. It started at about 11:20 in the morning, and I think we finally got everything all wrapped up a little after 6 o'clock in the evening. As you noted, that the fire was detected by our staff, and it was pretty quickly controlled by first responders. And I just want to make sure, can you hear me okay? Yes, no? Okay, good. So basically, the incident response followed all of the steps that have been outlined in our emergency action plan, and certainly both staff's initial fire suppression attempt and the subsequent evacuation, they were well coordinated and appropriate for the level of training and the equipment. And ultimately we had no injuries, we had no damage or loss to the facility or our equipment, and we were able to resume operations the following morning. And so overall, our response was pretty remarkable. Although that being said, we have identified, we're always looking for that A+, right? We did identify some additional activities that we're going to be putting into place. We are asking that the board authorized the board to sign the letter to the editor, basically to express our appreciation to the first responders. We had 4 responding units, being Humboldt Bay Fire Department, Samoa Fire Department, Lolita Fire Department, as well as Fortuna Fire Department. And we also had city ambulance standing by off-site in the event that their services were needed. Recology was able to temporarily divert their Arcata and Eureka route trucks to the Fortuna transfer station, which meant, because everything is a ripple effect, that then the Fortuna transfer station had to close to self-haul activities in order to accommodate the additional traffic as well as material volume going there. So, really appreciate that they were also able to, provide us assistance. While it wasn't direct, it was actually a direct service. Lost Coast Outpost and Kim Kemp's Redheaded Black Belt, they were providing real-time media coverage and information to the general public. So that helped us to intersect people who were otherwise maybe coming in and letting them know that we were closed for a period of time. Bettendorf Trucking, they were able to adjust their trailer pickup and delivery schedule, which meant that we were able to get timely removal of all of our solid waste. And one thing I do want to add is that a couple of years back, we developed a tonnage estimator tool, which has enabled a more reliable removal of accumulated solid waste from the tip floor. Every ton of waste that comes in goes over a scale. We know how much material is on site. We've combined that with a tonnage estimator using prior history in terms of every Monday we can expect plus or minus X number of tons coming in from franchise haulers and self-haulers. So we've been able to use that, which means we didn't have a lot of material on the floor. We had about 2.5 loads of material on the floor. What does that translate into? About 50 tons of material. In the past, we could sometimes see up to 15 loads of material on the floor. So fortunately, by being able to better maintain the volume of material, it also further reduces our risk in the event of a fire such as this. Also want to note Maple's service. They prioritize the dispatch of personnel that same day in order to reset our suppression system and to replace those suppression bulbs that had gotten activated. Six Rivers Portable Toilets, they were able to mobilize a pump truck because we had to pump out the fire suppression water out of our stormwater collection system. And we also had to be pumping water into the city of Eureka's wastewater treatment system so that it was being properly handled. Hooven and Company, they also had to dispatch a staff and equipment in order to continue helping our assistance with the pumping out of fire suppression water. So it's a pretty significant volume when you start looking at the diameters of the hoses that are delivering the water. We really appreciate the City of Eureka Wastewater Treatment Plant because they were just remarkable in helping to support our needs in what am I trying to say, in managing the fire suppression. And honestly, I can't begin to speak highly enough about our staff. It was their detection, their response. They got the public off-site immediately. They were off-site immediately. And post-event, all of the cleanup activities. And in particular, I just want to do a call out to Laurel Uber. She is on the line with us also today. She is our safety coordinator. And Erin Manson, who's one of our operators. We have Elder Marias, who may or may not be on the line. I know Donna is here. And we have Tony Heacock, our Director of Environmental Health and Safety, and Eric Keller. And I do want to note that Eric was providing the predominant direction in the response of the fire, in addition to the fellow who was up in that excavator who was working with the fire department. That was Eric. So I really want to express my appreciation to all of their assistants. I mean, they all kept calm heads and responded appropriately so. And at the point that it was looking like it was going to be bigger than they were going to be able to take on, rightfully so, they removed themselves, let the first responders come in, and that's your team. And that concludes our report. And
Thank you, Jill.
Oh, shoot.
And yeah, just, I really appreciate all of the work of staff. And thanks for showing the video. It's that was a significant fire. So, just thank you to everyone who worked so diligently on that. Do any members of the board have questions about this item? Are there any members
Leslie,
of
if I
the,
could,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, we'd like to really just take this opportunity with the fire to just help promote the awareness around hazardous waste or hot embers or, batteries, anything that helps spark. So that's the purpose of the letter, why we're asking for your approval of that.
thank you, that makes sense. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for any comments.
Just great job. I mean, the video was really, really powerful. I watched it a couple of weeks ago when Peter was visiting, and yeah, definitely gave me chills. So yeah, I was glad you guys were on it, and you could see how calm everyone was. And yeah, I just really appreciate everyone's work on it. You guys did an awesome job. So it really, really speaks highly to your level of skill. So thank you so much.
Definitely. Thanks, Elaine. I think all of the board echoes those sentiments. Okay, well, with that, we have a recommended action, which is to receive the presentation and authorize the chair to submit a letter to the editor expressing appreciation to the first responders, HWA employees, Recology, Bettendorf Trucking, Maple Services, and local media for their assistance and coordination during the HWA transfer station fire in September 2021. Would anyone like to make that recommended motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion that we
I'll
approve.
second the motion.
Thank you, Robin. So we have Elaine with Robin seconding. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Frank.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, anyone abstaining? Okay, motion carries with board member Bone absent. We'll move on, and thank you again to all of the staff, to Eric and Tony and Laurel and and everyone else who's here. We really appreciate it. And Frank, though you're not a staff, I'm sure your work with the college was appreciated too. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6. Authorize the chair to submit a letter to the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors supporting the establishment of a public financing authority, Samoa Peninsula Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. Jill, do you have a report for that?
Yeah, in short, in 2014, the state of California created the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District as a replacement for the state redevelopment funding and a tool for local governments to be using to finance infrastructure and other improvement projects. Humboldt County Board of Supervisors approved the Samoa Peninsula Enhanced Infrastructure Finances District in June of 2021, and they're going to be considering the establishment of a public finance authority at a meeting which is scheduled for October 19th, which is next week. Staff is recommending that the board approve the attached letter expressing support for the district and to identify the need for the development of an organics processing facility. HWMA's 2013 strategic plan does support regional development of an organics processing facility, and local jurisdictions, of course, are all working towards compliance with 1383. And it also requires some development of both the diversion activity as well as the processing. So a letter has been prepared for your consideration, and at the direction of I'll have to work with you, Leslie, so we can turn around a quick signature. Yeah, so that's the request, is that you review and approve the board letter.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions from any members of the board? Okay. Any members of the public wish to make comment? Okay, we'll close public comment. In terms of, my perspective, I think I've been kind of following this. We had a presentation on it at our REDAC meeting a few weeks ago. So it's kind of interesting. They're relatively new in the state, and there aren't very many kind of in action yet. So I do think it's good to give input on this, especially since these kinds of 1383, we already have a group working on it, and it's going to take funding. So I think that it's kind of smart to get in on this, so to speak, while they're still taking comments about the overall structuring of it. So thank you for kind of being forward thinking on that. Hopefully, I actually spoke with Scott Adair about it, not specific to 1383, but just about it a little bit. And he, from the county perspective, there's definitely still a strong interest in hearing what people think, and getting those comments. And and there's room, and that will have an influence on how it's formed and what people are thinking about as they're forming it. So thank you again. Any other comments? Okay. Well, with that, would anyone like to entertain a motion? We do have a recommended motion to authorize the chair to submit a letter to the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors supporting the establishment of a public financing authority, the Samoa Peninsula Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Frank.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Thank you,
Is that
Meredith.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, motion passes with board member Bone.
I'm sorry, can I, real quick, can I get the name of the person who put the motion forward?
That was Frank Wilson.
Frank Wilson, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah. And Meredith seconded it, just in case you didn't get that. Thank you. Okay, well, we will go ahead to the standing item of board member reports. Do any members of the board wish to report anything at this time?
You might want to go through roll call. Or a roll.
Sure, yeah. Go ahead. Elaine Hogan?
Nope, nothing to report. Thanks.
Frank Wilson?
Nothing to report.
Robin Smith?
Nothing to report.
Meredith Matthews?
Nothing to report.
Okay. I'll just say, I think it's been covered, but I really enjoyed my second or maybe third at this point tour of the transfer station. So thank you, Eric and Tony, again for being there, and I learned something new every time. Also, Robin Prasker and I are coordinating, sorry, to have a neighborhood beautification event, and Eureka has a really great, I'm gonna have a drink of water real quick. A really great neighborhood beautification program that Robin's implementing, where people, within the neighborhoods kind of sign up to do beautification events that are supported by the city. So just so folks know, if anyone's watching, those are available, and they're really fun, and they're a really great way to meet your neighbors. Thanks, Robin. Okay, we will move on to item number 8, the executive director's report.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple things and then I'll dovetail back into your beautification because we've got some new information that we'll be sharing with your staff members shortly as well. Very briefly, our timber harvest activities have commenced and completion is actually expected tomorrow. They might continue doing some cleanup in the next week, but we're almost completed with our timber harvest activities. With respect to the landfill, we are in the midst of putting together renewal of a permit for the Cummings Road landfill, and that's going to entail a non-groundwater release and groundwater release cost estimates and information. So we're working with the LEA on getting that information together. Our permit expires, I believe, on February 22nd. SB 1383, the request for proposals, we received 4 proposals from firms for the compliance planning assistance that were due on October 1st, and the local task force ad hoc committee and HWMA has commenced with review and determining those firms who will be invited for an interview. So that is moving forward. It's a lot of work, and it's been pretty exciting to see the responses so far. With respect to the Administrative Services Director, we have completed our recruitment. So we've interviewed and finalized. We are in the midst of finalizing the background and reference check process for a new Administrative Services Director. And they're expected to start on November 1st. The first priority is, of course, going to be working with the temporary controller that we have to evaluate our outdated software accounting system and to initiate migration of data from our unsupported software now to a new software system. So we're also taking a look at the files and documents that are necessary for our auditors so that they can initiate their review of our books in mid-November. So I just do want to note that currently, as well as to assist with the transition of our incoming new director, those critical tasks are going to remain temporarily assigned to other staff members, such as myself and Tony and Laurel and Eric, just to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks and make sure that we can have some continuity as the new person is coming in during that time period. So moving on to some of our staffing, I do want the board to know, as well as members of the public who may be listening, we've had several staff members resign over the course of the last month, and it's being due primarily to area starting wages being offered at several dollars an hour more than HWMA's entry pay. So I know that we've lost a couple people to some of the local casinos. And so we have secured 1 temporary employee from Express. They don't have anybody else. In addition to Sequoia personnel, they don't have anybody that they can send to us. We've made outreach with Uplift Eureka, as well as, putting out ads. We've got flyers at our facility because we get, several hundred vehicles per day. So we've got big, help wanted signs in there. But, the staffing scenario is such that we're 1 position away from having to close the Eureka Recycling Center on Mondays or Sundays and Mondays, simply because we don't have the staffing for it. So we're going to continue, working on this and think creatively around how we can, do more with less. But if anybody is aware of folks that are looking for work, we are actively recruiting at this time. Remaining items include the ongoing support and coordination for the executive director recruitment efforts. And one of the things that I want to let everybody know about is actually something that is just announced by Caltrans. The governor has announced the Clean California Initiative. It's a local grant program, and they're going to be funding up to $5 million per project to local jurisdictions with a total amount of $926 million available statewide. So they're looking for projects, and Laurel has been able to attend the meeting, so she's providing us some feedback on here, and they're looking for a number of multiple small projects that could be combined into a singular application, and that they're available for jurisdictions. So I will get this information out to folks. I think the meeting was early Monday or Tuesday. They're also wanting to put together an additional program where there would be like this trash amnesty day, if you will, and work with communities that have, some problematic areas to perform cleanup activities. I'll use the example of my little town of Orick. We do have some areas that are just inherently problematic. Very few places here have curbside pickup, primarily because most people are up in the hill, very narrow roads. We're not getting a lot of franchise trucks in and out of here. So sometimes we've got some properties that are in dire need of some assistance, and it's be pretty expensive for them. So, it could be something that the county could help sponsor and assist in some community cleanup. So I will be getting this information out to your respective staff members, but as our local elected leaders who are constantly, faced with the, well, why can't you help me pay for the cleanup of, X, Y, Z? There may be some funding that you could be able to avail to. So please work with your staff members so that we can start seeing some good programs coming out here. Let's see here. That actually concludes my report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate all of your work that you do on behalf of the organization. You put a lot into your work and into your reports. Were there any questions for Director Duffy? Okay, thanks again. Well, with that, we will move to our closed session. Before we move to closed session, are there any members of the public who wish to make comment on this item? We have one item on closed session. It is Public Employment Executive Director pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. So I'll go ahead and open public comment. Okay, seeing that no members of the public wish to make comment at this time, we'll close public comment and then we'll go ahead and go into closed session. So if you're not a member of the board, we're just going to kindly ask that you exit the meeting, and thanks for being here.
Okay. Eric, can you go ahead and have things turned over to me?
You should have it now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead, and before anybody says anything, I'm going to be just removing people right now.
Thank you.
And this takes a few minutes because it wants to know if you're like removing them as a complaint. So I want to make sure I hit the right button. So, okay, so I've got myself, I have Leslie, Elaine, Frank, Meredith, Nancy, Robin, and the studio is still in here. So I'm going to try again.